Hey, seventh graders, a couple of terms that you need to know as we go on to the next standard. First one is rational numbers. Rational numbers are the numbers that we use most on a daily basis. They could be decimals, whole numbers, fractions, mixed numbers, anything like that. For example, the cost of an item. Let's say it's $1.50. That's a rational number. Okay, you ate 2/3 of the pizza. That's a rational number. Okay, it takes 1 1/4 cups of sugar to make cookies. That's another rational number. It's the numbers that we typically use on a daily basis. Okay? Additive inverse are two numbers that add up to 0. For example, if we had 6, the additive inverse would be -6. If you add those two numbers together, it's going to equal 0. If we had -4, the additive inverse would be a +4. Okay, another term to keep in mind, and that will be helpful as we go through the next standard. A number line, we talked about number lines a little bit already, but number lines to the right is our positive numbers, to the left are negative numbers. This is a horizontal number line. Sometimes we will use a vertical number line. And then numbers that go up are positive, numbers that go down are negative. Okay? And for the problems that we're doing, we will start at 0, and then if it's positive, we'll go to the left or to the right or up. If it's negative, we'll go to the left or down. Okay? Absolute value is similar to additive inverse, and the fact that you're going to be using the opposite, but absolute value is always going to turn out to be positive. Okay, so if I have a -4, the absolute value of -4, which is written with bars around it, like that, is a +4. Okay, the absolute value of a +4 is still +4. So it takes any number, positive or negative, and makes it a positive number. Hey, seventh graders, we need to know how to add and subtract fractions for this next standard. So we're going to review how to do that. First thing we need is a common denominator. Okay, and how we find a common denominator is we find the least common multiple. So let's say we have two fractions, 3/5, and we're adding 2/3. We need to find the least common multiple, the smallest number that 3 and 5 both go into evenly. So let's start listing multiples. We have 3, we have 5. We'll start going by 3s. So 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. Go by 5s, 5, 10, 15. And then we can see the smallest number that 3 and 5 both go into is 15. So that's going to be our common denominator. So we're going to rewrite our fractions with 15. We have to figure out what we did to each denominator to get 15, though. We can't just change the bottom to 15 and leave the top as 3 and the other one as 2. Whatever we did to the bottom, we have to do the same thing to the top. So we have to think 5 times what is 15? 5 times 3 is 15. That gave us this denominator. So what we did to the bottom, we have to do the same on the top. So we're going to multiply 3 times 3, just like we multiplied 5 times 3. 3 times 3 is 9. So now we have our fraction. Since we multiplied top and bottom both by 3, we didn't change the value of the fraction at all. We just made it look a little bit different. Okay, with the second fraction, 2/3, we need to get 15 as well. So we have to think 3 times what is 15? Well, 3 times 5 is 15. That's how I got this 15 right here. So what I did to the bottom, again, I need to do to the top. So I'm going to do 2 times 5, which is 10. Now again, I didn't change the value of the fractions at all, I just made them look differently. But now that they have a common denominator, now I can add them together. Whenever you add or subtract fractions, the denominator does not change once you have the common denominator. So the denominator of our answer will be 15, and then we add our numerators together. 9 plus 10 is 19, and that would be my answer when I add those two fractions together. Okay? All right, adding and subtracting mixed numbers. Very much the same as just adding the fractions, but we have an extra step. First, we're going to have to rock around the clock and then do the same thing we did up here. Okay, so let's take a look at a couple mixed numbers. Let's say we have 3 1/2 minus, we'll subtract this time, 4 3/4. Okay? So before we find a common denominator, we're going to rock around the clock to make them into improper fractions. Okay, the way we rock around the clock, we do 2 times 3, and then we're going to add 1. So 2 times 3 is 6, plus 1 is 7. So that's going to turn into 7 over the original denominator of 2, 7/2. Okay? Then over here, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to rock around the clock. We're going to multiply, and then we're going to add. Okay, 4 times 4 is 16, plus 3 is 19. And that's going to be over the original denominator of 4. And then we still have our minus in between. Okay? We rocked around the clock. We turned those mixed numbers into improper fractions. Now we can find a common denominator so that we can subtract. So again, we do the same thing we did up here. We need to find multiples of 2 and 4 until we find the smallest number that 2 and 4 both go into. Okay, this one might be a pretty easy one, but we can still show the process. So we'll start listing multiples. We start with 2 and go by 2. So 2, 4, 6, and we could keep on going. 4, we start with 4, and that's all the farther we have to go. So now we can see the smallest number that 2 and 4 both go into is 4. So that's going to be our common denominator. All right. So on the first fraction, we need to figure out what do we do to 2 to get our common denominator of 4. What would we multiply 2 by to get 4? Well, 2 times 2 is 4. What we do to the bottom, we also have to do to the top. So we're going to do 7 times 2, which is 14. And the second fraction already has a denominator of 4, so we actually don't have to change that one at all. It just stays 19 over 4. Again, when we add or subtract fractions, our denominator doesn't change, stays the same as the common denominator. But we have to apply our rules now. We have a positive 14 and a negative 19. Our rules say that we need to determine if they're like or unlike. Okay? They are unlike because 14 is positive and 19 is negative. So our rules say if they're unlike, we have to subtract. So let's subtract 19 and 14. That turns out to be 5. And then we keep the sign of the bigger number. What's bigger, 14 or 19? Well, 19 is bigger, it's a bigger number, and the sign is negative. So we're going to put 5 in our numerator, and our sign is going to be negative. So our answer is a negative 5/4 for that one.